So, My Hero Academia Season 7, Episode 9 is out. And I'm here to really talk about it because there's a fair amount to talk about. From added scenes, to differing dialogue, to even whether or not this episode was animated extremely well or just okay. All of that and more will be discussed in this video. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Andrew, and I'm here to review and do a breakdown of My Hero Academia Season 7, Episode 9. There's a fair amount that we really need to go over, as well as just tying into some interesting aspects that really makes this episode as great as it is, from just the action itself to really emphasizing the characters that are going to play crucial roles in the war moving forward. All of that and more will be discussed in this review and breakdown, so look forward to it because we're about to start it right now. And to start off, Episode 9 covers approximately 2.5 chapters, half the normal length of the previous episodes, as it covers chapters 353, 354, and 355 from pages 1 to 8. And when it comes to the episode itself, it actually derives its name from chapter 355, titled Extras. And the episode actually begins with reusing the final scenes of the last episode of Shoto using his final attack upon Dabi, defeating him in that moment. And from the opening, we actually get to see Burning announcing to everyone in the location that Dabi was defeated by Shoto and that the heroes are now revitalized in fighting against the Nomu. Where we do get an added action sequence that is not necessarily in the manga, where we actually see Ida breaking through the armor and spikes of the Nomu, landing an attack on the Nomu, while relative to the manga, it was more or less unsure of who this individual was. It could have just been a random hero character in the crowd. But we do have a moment of some random heroes just announcing how they may have had it easier, and how there are other areas that may have had it rougher due to the jailbreakers being at those locations. Where this is where we begin to cut to more new and old locations that we've seen prior, as we have All Might reveling in the fact that one of his students were able to take down Dabi, as well as beginning the announcement to all of the other locations of the hero's victory at this moment. And what is interesting about this sequence is that this is not something that is actually in the manga, but we do have President Mike as the narrator who pretty much explains what All Might actually did without us actually seeing him giving the announcement to everyone. And that just comes to show how just different the manga and the anime are, and how the anime is doing things based off what was established earlier on in the series, such as President Mike being a narrator of the series where there is no clear narrator in the manga. But from there, we start cutting to many different locations. And for the most part, when it comes to all of the locations that we've actually jumped to, pretty much each area that we jump to has certain characters not in the manga performing more action in the anime. Such as the Jaku Hospital, where we get a lot more added dialogue and action from Mina, Mudman, as well as Kirishima, as well as the other heroes and students. As we do have a focus in the anime, same as the manga, of the heroes announcing and being happy of Shoto's defeat of Dabi, while also having the re-establishment of some of the leaders that are going to be playing crucial roles in the war, especially when it comes to Midnight's killer. And something else that I like about this scene is that as Mina is realizing that this is the individual that most likely killed Midnight, we do have an added sequence of a random villain that actually attacked Mina earlier on in this scene, coming in for a final blow as we see Kirishima coming in for the save. That was not something that was in the manga, but I like how they were able to tie this all in the anime in a way that makes sense with all of the added action that was placed in this section of the episode. As well as added action with characters such as Ojiro, Sato, and Sero in Tokuba National Stadium, a location that we did not necessarily see prior to this moment, but was very much hinted at on the actual map screen, as well as we do get some added action of Bakugo going up against Tomura, which was not necessarily in the manga at this time. And from there, we do return to another familiar location, the location of Troy, where we do get to see even more added villains and heroes fighting against each other, as we get the introduction of Kunita, an assassin sent by All for One, preparing to confront and fight against Fat Gum as well as Ayama. And how he has this very unique speaking pattern that very much confuses Fat Gum, as he pretty much announces that his goal right here is to take out Aoyama, who is a traitor to All for One and a threat that needs to be exterminated, because that's just the type of person that All for One is. He does not leave traitors and betrayers alive. But even from there, we come back to a final new location not seen within the war previously, with once again more added scenes of the heroes fighting against what we're assuming to be heteromorphs, as well as Kota using his birds to fight against them as well. But we do see Spinner coming in, and luckily enough Shoji is able to protect his friend, as we do have a moment in the manga that's in the anime now of Spinner announcing how what is said about Dabi being defeated is a lie, and how we pretty much have Spinner thinking to himself that him and Dabi are completely different, and that Dabi would never lose when it comes to a fight or even with his ambitions against anyone. As we see Spinner in this new form, and pretty much saying how Dabi is just better than him, where he does not need an actual additional quirk in respects to Dabi in comparison to Spinner, who we see in this anime, not in the manga, of All for One actually giving him a quirk. Well, yes, it's pretty much stated in both mediums that All for One is giving Spinner a quirk. In the actual anime, we see it actually be done, as we see that as soon as he was given the quirk, he transformed into this more muscular and monstrous figure. Which, something else that is interesting about this is that in the manga, we don't really get an understanding of whether or not Spinner's voice has changed, but in the anime, it is very distinct to show that his voice has become a lot more gravelly, a lot more deeper, and a lot more monstrous in its own tone. But we also get something from the manga in the anime continuing on the idea that Shoji is going to be playing a major part in this war, which was also hinted at by Horikoshi in just a Jump Festa event many moons ago. But yeah, that's pretty much cutting all the way over to different locations where the heroes learn about the defeat of Dabi, as we return back to Kamino, where Ida is there to comfort his best friend Shoto. Well, not necessarily best friend, but something else that I want to point out in this moment is a very nice animation detail of Shoto's eye as we see him about to cry after you just have him apologizing to Ida about stalling his engines, where his tears on his right side, his ice cold side, immediately freeze up, just showing how cold he is and how cold his body can get. And as we cut over from this moment of Shoto and Ida, we actually get to see some heroes questioning how Dabi is alive at this moment, as we see a small flash of light appearing on his chest, implying that Dabi Toya is still very much alive and is potentially about to get a second wind. And speaking of number 2, this is where we cut over to where the bulk of this episode is going to be focused on, which is the Gunga Mountain Villa location, where we see Endeavor and Hawks about to go up against All for One, as All for One in this moment is just teasing Endeavor, as we also get more implications about All for One's weakness being his mask. And this entire sequence just really adds to the type of character that All for One is, where even if he is outmatched in power and speed, what he's able to make up for those shortcomings is his ability to manipulate and tease people and cause them to slip up and make mistakes. And I just want to bring up that in this moment, we also get to see the action here is very much well animated and fast paced, keeping up with the idea of Hawks being a very speedy character, and how this is juxtaposed with the information that we learn in this episode from All for One, that because of the incident that happened to him, that he is very much crippled and not up to top speed as he was prior, even with the help of Recovery Girl. As we confirm that their goal is to prevent All for One from doing his massive AoE damages against the heroes by keeping his focus on them, while also getting close enough to attack him, but not close enough for him to touch them and potentially steal their quirks. And we see that once again, the anime really emphasizes the powers of the fire users of the Todoroki family by showing Endeavor using his vanishing fist, but seeing that he's a lot more physical and brutal with it, landing multiple consecutive punches in the anime, which is not necessarily displayed in the manga. But even as we see Endeavor just hammering into All For One in this moment, more scenes of the heroes fighting against the villains in more detail than it was in the manga, as we have All For One monologuing about how Endeavor is a failure and how we had his prodigy, his perfect creation, going up against his failure, Shoto versus Dabi. As we have more emphasis of All For One beginning to try and get into Endeavor's head, as Hawks tries to mitigate this as possible, as we get the confirmation from All For One that we pretty much knew for a while, that he was the one that found Toya's body, which causes Endeavor to lose it. And All For One takes advantage of Endeavor's loss of sanity and lands a massive attack, very much critically injuring him. And this is where something interesting happens between the manga and the anime, because in this scene, he says now, but in the English translation of it, he gives the name as being Oopsie Daisy, which is also the title of chapter 354. And how I'm not sure if this is necessarily a change with the subtitles or if it's going to be a change with the dub, but this is a major change because in the anime, it's very much more methodical of All For One, while in the manga, he's being a lot more playful. Because in the manga, he knows that he very much won against Endeavor for this moment, so this childish retort just really much is adding more fuel to the fire in more ways than one. But yes, unfortunately, due to that attack, Endeavor falls to the ground while Hawks tries to protect and save him, but All For One plans on delivering a potential deadly blow against him. But luckily enough, Jiro as well as Tokoyami come to Hawks' rescue. And this is a very interesting dynamic to have in this scene, not just in the manga but also in the anime, as Tokoyami has a relationship with Hawks, which is the reasoning why Hawks even allows for Tokoyami to help fight by his side, as they are both waiting for Endeavor to potentially recover because Hawks knows that Endeavor was able to survive the attack of All For One. So as we see that they're beginning to team up with one another, we also get to see that All For One is realizing where the situation is going and identifies the weakest link being Jiro. But luckily enough, Hawks with his fast, quick thinking as well as his feathers was able to protect both her as well as Tokoyami. And how this is the moment where Jiro begins to feel a similar level of fear and dread that both Deku as well as Aoyama was finally feeling when it comes to All For One and his nature. And as Jiro is succumbing to that fear, All For One combines the grotesque arm that we saw earlier in this episode and the mouths coming out of it to form this pseudo laser that he points at Jiro and Tokoyami. And something that I like that the anime does is that it clarifies a moment in the manga that was not clearly shown. Where in the manga, we see the laser fired, and the implication is that the heroes, specifically Jiro and Tokoyami, took that blast head on, but it's implied that the direction was slightly shifted in the manga. In the anime, we actually see it go down in real time. And I like that the fact that we're able to see it because it clarifies what we saw in the manga to really get the weight of how this was able to happen. And as they were taking damage, Hawks was also attacked at the same time, as we see that the episode ends halfway through chapter 355, where it's confirmed that both Jiro and Tokoyami took major damage. However, Jiro unfortunately lost her earphone jack, as All For One criticizes them for just being sort of like extras. And let's just say that from what we're getting from this episode, next episode from previews, we're probably going to have some very, very crisp and very impactful animation with the potential defeat of All For One. But yeah, that's kind of my review and breakdown for this episode of My Hero Academia. There's a lot in this episode that we really needed to talk about, and I want to go into more detail about because there was a lot more added moments and scenes and action that were not necessarily in the manga, and a lot more added scenes that we saw in the last episode. But while these scenes really add to the story, it does not really add much to the very well animated scene. But I will say, for the action that we get, it very much complements what we've seen in the episode and really just makes this war a little bit more girthy and really showing that this is an actual battle, not just against the main characters, but just two sides actually having conflict with one another. Not just focusing on the important characters, but also showing more of the side characters actually playing parts in this actual battle, this actual war. So yeah, while the animation is not necessarily the best in this episode, it is still very much top tier. But hey, That's all I really have to say for my breakdown and review. And let me ask you this, how did you feel about the episode? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? And was there anything in this episode that I may have missed? If I did, leave a comment down below telling me what I may or may not have missed. And do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!